Yeah, we did have a range rider in Cle Elum. Last year they rested that pasture. There were some cows in there, but the main pasture in McKinley was rested. Across the state, Duke and Kapow had quite a few. I think in the neighborhood of like probably 40 total. I'd have to go back. It's in the annual report. But with the multiple organizations and our contract range riders, the DPCL cost shares and things, it's the producers that are interested in getting involved. We try and help them as much as we can with that stuff. I don't know, Kevin, do you know how many or Mike? Yeah, I don't remember offhand. It's you can check out our annual report though. It's in there under the livestock section.
When you say a range rider, do they have to be mounted on horseback, or can they be on foot or on Laura's vehicle?
All the above. So some of them are running around on quads, some of them are in pickup trucks, some of them are hiking, through even smaller pasture. But a lot of them are on horseback because they're in pretty rough terrain and spending the day trying to get to as many of those livestock as they can, and just get eyes on them. If you can, push the calves so that they're straggling off. They're with adults, especially just before dark. And that's a lot of the stuff. Well, the calves will go off and feed in the evening and in the dark. And you want to, if somebody can go through those bigger pastures and kind of congregate those calves with adults before they tuck in for the night, they're going to be a lot more resilient to wolves coming through. And even if you could just get them to the smaller openings where there's places that there's some defensive cover, or not defensive cover, but some space where they can see wolves coming and the adults are there to protect calves. Because usually it's the calves that are vulnerable. We don't get a lot of adult livestock that are killed or injured by wolves. It's mostly calves.
So is there, one of their jobs, if they see wolves, to haze them away, or no?
They can. Wolves are pretty, you don't get many opportunities to haze a wolf. They pretty much will run off if a person's around. It's more of keeping the animals, checking out the behavior of the animals. When wolves have run through a herd of cattle, they can get pretty skittish. So you can tell just by the behavior of the cattle sometimes if they've had interactions with carnivores or wolves in general. So they look for that. They look for injuries. If there's injured or dead livestock, we want to pull those off the range so they don't become an attractant for wolves. Even if they weren't killed by wolves, you don't want a dead cow laying in the middle of the live cows because that's going to bring the wolves in. They can smell a carcass from miles away and they'll come in to feed on that carcass, regardless if they killed it or not. And so that becomes an attractant and also makes those calves more vulnerable if they're around that carcass. So they, will get that carcass out of there. They'll get sick or injured livestock off the range so they aren't vulnerable to attack. They'll get them back to the farm where they can doctor them up and take care of them. So it's those tasks that the range rider really helps to minimize that conflict. The biggest thing is the dead stuff. Whenever there's dead stuff in there, it just becomes this attractant and leads to problems over time, especially bone piles. Even these folks that just pile up the dead livestock on the back of their property, that kind of issue, one, it habituates wolves to people as they bring dead stuff and feed it. There's human scent there, plus there's the livestock, but then it also keeps those wolves coming down to feed on that stuff in and around close to those livestock. And so keeping those, burying those carcasses, getting them to the landfill will cost you the price of taking them to the landfill and help pay for that. In one instance on a dairy in Northeast Washington, we dug some big pits so they could just push them in and bury them. Try and do things to help those folks kind of clean up that stuff so that we don't have the interactions, because that's where we have the biggest negative issues. All those numbers on depredations, it's a lot of things like that that can contribute to that. If we can clean some of that up, we have far fewer issues. And so we've seen success with that. Sure.
I have to ask a local question.
No worries.
The last time in 2019, you said that there had been a sighting of the South Fork at a tree farm. Are there any recent local?
South Fork at a tree farm. I don't know which one. Is that the Falls Creek one?
I think you got a trail cam or something
Oh.
that somebody, I think it was
I
last
can
year.
help right on that. I was gonna ask the same question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard a report of 6 wolves at Goldmeyer Hot Springs on a trail cam.
Oh, I didn't hear that one, but, no, I
You
was
know
on
what that
the South Fork.
I've not seen it.
Okay, I haven't seen the one at Gold Springs, the hot springs, but I do know we had a caller. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, from one of your biologists actually.
Oh, okay.
One of your new hires, a lady, I can't
So, yeah. I don't know, I mean, Mike is pretty local as far as there's something going on.
A report from one of our
Well,
bios.
yeah, one of your safety bios, she's a younger gal, she's not conflict. I wanna say she's with the, but I met with
I don't know.
Yeah.
My second question is, you haven't had any wolves use the wildlife bridge, right?
We have not, we
Do
did
you
have one.
expect they might, or?
I suspect eventually, so we did have a wolf, the one that went to the South Cascades, he was originally from the Teanaway. And he went and hung out in the Nanum for a little bit, and then he decided to take a walkabout up here to Gold Creek. And so he went up past the wildlife crossing structure, kind of bumped into the highway right up by Elpental, and then went all the way back down past the crossing structure again, and hung out on Easton Ridge, kind of down by Suncadia for a little bit, and then went to Indian John Hill, and bumped into the elk fence on the kind of past Indian John Hill, where the rest stop is in Cleon, east of Cleon. Bumped into that elk fence for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden made it up to the end of the elk fence and shot across the highway there. It looked like. And yeah, so that one ended up going down all the way to the South Cascades, and we're still tracking that one. I caught it again this winter, and we had to recollar it because his collar was going to come off in March. When the battery starts going dead, we have an automatic drop off, so they don't have to pack it around their whole entire life. But we actually got in and caught it again before the collar dropped off, and we were able to put a fresh collar on, fresh batteries, and so. But yeah, so that one did come up by the crossing structure, but it didn't cross it. I suspect that they would definitely use it, you know, and even the undercrossings might be more amenable, those longer bridges and things. You know, the way they have it set up now, I think it's definitely possible. But this one happened to have just crossed. Wolves are not super, if a wolf wants to go somewhere, they're gonna find a way. They're just gonna work at it until they find a way, and they're gonna get where they wanna go. And so, you know, when you look at those, we had the one go up to Northeast Washington this summer, and it actually came over here to Snoqualmie for a little bit, just before the rains came in fall. I don't know when that first rainfall was, but it got over here to the Middle Fork of Snoqualmie for a little bit, and
That's what I was thinking of.
it might have been.
South Fork, it might have been Middle Fork, yeah.
Yeah, but then it
Yeah.
started to rain, and boy, the thing took off and went the other way, and it stayed in the Nanum for a couple days, and then all of a sudden it swam the Columbia River. It went across the Columbia Basin, right past Steamboat Rock, swam the Columbia River again, went across the Caldwell Reservation, swam Lake Roosevelt, ended up over the Huckleberry Range, and then on the other side, a range just outside of Deer Park in the old Five Sisters Pack territory. So when you think about when a wolf wants to go, it just goes. It doesn't matter if it's a, 5-mile swim, it's gonna go. And so, they'll cross the highway, they'll figure out some way to do it. Some of them don't make it, they might get hit, but
Is it what for me?
I imagine so. It was that 2 to 3 year old range when you'd expect them to disperse. And so, yeah, it's gonna just look for mating. I think, it came from the Teanaway, it's pretty slim pickings down there. There's not a lot of packs around, so they're gonna take off and look to try and find some other wolves around and see if it can find a mate and carve out a spot for a pack. So, but yeah, it's kind of cool with that collar data to be able to track them. In the old days with the VHF, you had to fly for hours in a plane, and you might pick it up, you might not. But now with the GPS technology, it just sends it to our email, and it's like, oh, it's here today. It's almost, addicting to, like, you check it out in the morning. Well, how far did it go? And it's like halfway across the state, or in Idaho or BC.